And this brings me to a question which I'd like to put to Ben. One of the things which I've been very impressed by has been the way that so many people in the UK have welcomed Hong Kongers here, have welcomed Hong Kongers not only to come and to live in the UK, but also I think a lot of people have been very open and encouraging of Hong Kongers to engage politically in the UK. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that if I take a step back and back as far as when we started Hong Kong Watch in the end of 2017, one of the very first things that we started to advocate on was the need for the British government to offer some kind of lifeline to Hong Kongers to cross the UK, because we knew even then that it was likely that that would be needed. So we did a lot of groundwork through 2018, 2019, and actually found a real level of cross-party support for this. There was a real recognition on the part of people in the Conservative Party, on all wings of the Conservative Party, as well as people in the Labour and Democrats. Paddy Ashdown, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, who was one of our founding patrons, was particularly encouraging of this. And as you all know, when the National Security Law was imposed on the 1st of July 2020, that very same day, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister at the time, announced the BNO scheme. And I think what's really striking about the BNO scheme is that it has real support across all sides in Parliament. I engage a lot with, as do my colleagues, with the shadow ministers on the Labour front bench and with the Liberal Democrats, and they're all committed to the BNO scheme. And that was further borne out, I think, by opinion polls that took place at that time about public opinion. And public opinion was very supportive of the BNO scheme. And I think everyone basically recognizes that we have a moral and indeed a legal responsibility to Hong Kong and to Hong Kongers. And also the real recognition that Hong Kongers would not only be helping Hong Kongers leave Hong Kong and build a new life in a free country, but actually there was appreciation that Hong Kongers would contribute something to our country as well. So it's not simply us helping Hong Kongers. I think it's a mutually beneficial initiative. And so within that context, I think people are very encouraging of Hong Kongers who are now here to engage with our political system, because this is your political system now. If it's your intention to stay in the UK for a long time, to become citizens, to build your life here, then this is your democracy as much as ours. And you're right that politicians are encouraging. I mean, we at Hong Kong Watch, I'm really pleased that you're doing this event today, and we at Hong Kong Watch have been doing a number of similar events over recent months. We did an event just beginning of, or just before the local government elections earlier this year in Suffolk to encourage Hong Kongers to understand our system of local government and how they could engage with the local government elections. We did an event in August with a panel assessing the Conservative Party leadership election. It wasn't a party political event, it was an event for anyone to observe and discuss the process of choosing our new Prime Minister. And we had a panel that included journalists basically from the centre-right, but also the centre-left. A journalist from New Statesman was on that. And we're about to, later this year, do a number of things in Parliament. And I wanted to mention this because I encourage people to apply for this. We're organising a tour of Parliament later this month. We're organising a workshop on how Parliament works. And we're also going to be setting up an internship scheme named in memory of Paddy Ashdown, our founding patron, where we plan to place 3 Hong Kongers. So it will be quite a competitive process because there will be only 3 places, but 3 Hong Kongers for a period of about 3 to 4 months each, with an MP of all three major parties, so the Conservatives, Labour and Democrats, as a way of helping Hong Kongers get to know Parliament better and how to engage. So I think, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Evan, that I think overall opinion across all parties and in the general public is very much that Hong Kongers are very welcome here, and we hope that you will not just build a new life here, but actually engage in, contribute to our political system.
Well, thank you, Ben. I think maybe just to sort of add a little bit onto that, and just to sort of share a little bit of a story of my own, and that is when I first came to the UK, I sort of went around, and I think it's a very sort of Hong Kong thing to do. When you're in a new place, you go around, and you know, if you go to Thailand, you look at people and you say, oh, you know, lots of Thai people. You know, you come to Britain, oh, lots of British people. But one of the things which I found really, you know, really important to understand about the UK is the UK, like Hong Kong, is a place full of refugees. It is a place full of people who have come to the UK because they have felt, you know, oppressed elsewhere. So you know, even when you see the man standing at the bus stop and you think, this man, he's got no interest in Hong Kong. The only people who are going to be interested in Hong Kong are going to be other Hong Kongers. What I've found personally is that hasn't been the case. It's surprising how many people in the UK have a connection with Hong Kong, firstly, and secondly, how many people have come to the UK again because they have, you know, felt essentially escaped authoritarianism in other parts of the world. So I think a lot of the difficulties and a lot of the struggles as a community that we have to go through coming here, I think we can find it in we can find advice and we can find support amongst people in the UK. But if I could just now ask Marcus, I mean, sort of, I guess from the perspective of you know, the Labour Party and the you know, the Fabian Society, when you look at Hong Kong, when you look at sort of Hong Kong issues, why are those issues sort of important to the Labour Party? Why are they important? Why would Labour Party members think Hong Kong issues are important to them?
Yeah. So there have been, you know, several people who theorize about what is foreign policy, right? And not to get too much into the detail of it, but a lot of people see it as an extension of domestic policy. So what happens at home influences how other countries see us. And that's really important to understanding how we think about Hong Kong. A lot of the Labour Party genuinely believe in a multicultural Britain. That's what makes us special. As Evan said, we've had lots and lots of waves of migration over history, and now we have a wonderful fabric of so many different cultures who've you know, maybe blended with others in the area, but have also retained a uniqueness that makes Britain special. And for me, I was born in Edinburgh, and I grew up in Scotland, which was 99% white at the time. I'm not exaggerating; it actually was 99% white. So it was very challenging. And I'm sure if you speak to anybody else, and if you have children who are maybe growing up here, maybe it's less of a thing in London, but you really have a struggle with identity and what does the country you're living in mean to you, and kind of what nationality, which group do you belong to, and that is a very big topic and a very well represented topic in the Labour Party. That's why we care about representation. We see East and Southeast Asians being very underrepresented in both councils and Parliament. There are only, there are only 2 MPs out of 650, despite East Asians being a much bigger part of the population. What does that mean in practice? It means that your issues, the things you care about which are specific to you, if you loved today's festival and the celebration of Chinese culture, if you care about your kids being able to learn Cantonese or Mandarin at school, if you care about what Britain's relationship with Hong Kong is, then it's very, very vital to get these faces, these cultures into Parliament so that they fully represent our multicultural Britain and fully represent the country that we live in.
Are we going to have a Q&A?
Yes, so we're coming up to, we've got about 15 minutes. So I'd like to put questions to the floor. Has anyone got any questions for our panel?
Shall I go first?
Please do.
To my mind, I've got two words to start my questions with. First of all, the issue of assimilation, and secondly, representation. Now, traditionally, say 50 odd years ago, the kind of Hong Kong people who came over were very different. Predominantly, they refused to assimilate. They were only here, so they said, to make money to send home. But now, the latest cohort, if I may call them that, they're very, very different people. Much better educated, much more aware of the world. Of course, the UK is still very new to them. We might ask, first of all, is there a desire to assimilate? And by assimilation, I do not mean that one would lose one's identity. I've been here long enough, I still regard myself as a Hong Konger. But there are lots of them who would say, oh, I don't want to go over to their side, I don't want to assimilate, you know, I'm just here, but I'm still Chinese. There's no way that I'm going to speak English or anything like that. That's wrong. Personally, I think that's completely wrong. How can we persuade people that you're here, it's great, join in. You know, you won't lose anything by doing that of yourself. Now, representation, that's very important because you would remember the saying back in the days, I think it was the Boston Tea Party or something like that, you know, no taxation without representation. So, one's paying tax in any event, and of course, representation is something that you either go and get it for yourself, or someone will probably want to do it for you. Now, what is it going to be? There's no straight answer, not at all. So I think for a lot of Hong Kong people, there is a desire to keep out of things. We don't want to sort of make ourselves too conspicuous. We just want to make money. The eternal preoccupation and obsession. That aside, but without representation, one's life would be much diminished. So how can we persuade people that actually there is good reason to get involved because you want to represent, you want to be represented. Although I may ask, probably because I'm a bit anti what's happening in British politics at the moment, how important it is to be affiliated to a particular political party.
Okay, so we've got quite a lot there to unpack, but essentially we're looking at two themes here. The first theme is assimilation, so really sort of, I think that comes back to what we discussed a little bit about identity, and how do we sort of keep, let's say, the Hong Kong identity, and in specifically, I think what you're referring to is the specific Hong Kong identity of the current cohort of migration from Hong Kong, whilst at the same time becoming part of Britain, becoming part of the fabric of our new home. And the second point, I think, was the issue of representation, and that old sort of conundrum here. If you don't go out and fight for representation, you may have a party coming along and claiming to represent you. Often they don't when they come over and claim to do that at all. But Simon, I mean, you've done a lot of work with recent immigrants, Hong Kong immigrants to the UK. What are your take on those two issues?
Well, it's very interesting, because we set up the database groups that we provide 3 different types of surveys. The first pillar for us was for community surveys, which is, for example, for casework, site posting, mental health support, and outreach activity. So we're so far the only one UK Wild community groups that we have each liaison outreach coordinators and officers in each region, even in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Wales. And moreover, that we also do some policy research that hopefully, because when first beginning, that even lots of civil servants, they need some data, empirical data, to justify their policy or adjust their policy. We're filling the gap. And I think it's very important because usually the civil servant, they're born to be a bit afraid of any political sensitive stuff, including our advocacy for democracy. They would think as political. So what we could do is we provide some empirical data for them. For example, we see new arrivals of Hong Kongers, 90% of those, the top priority of the fear would be the persecution of national security law from Hong Kong. And the law claim extraterritoriality, which is globally effective even in the UK South. And that is about the judicial sovereignty of the UK. And that is about the domestic policy, and government officials need to deal with this. When we provide empirical data, they cannot reject. That's not political. That's your people. That's your British nationals. They have this kind of fear, and you have your sense of duty to protect them. So how could we do that? Is we build diaspora groups to push the foreign, highly philosophical questions, highly politically sensitive questions within the domestic empirical question, policy question. That is the process. How could we do? But moreover, what we can do, we can see community works. We engage with the mass public people. We engage with not only Hong Kong people, but bring Hong Kong people to be with British locals. Let them to know how to do integrate. We'll be really cautious about using the term assimilation because usually that would be the one way. As you rightly mentioned, that should be maintained and safeguard identity. So what we could do is integration. How could we do integrate? And what we could persuade with the government officials recently, like the civil servants at the Department for Life and Arts, they're responsible for domestic community affairs. They don't want to get into any kind of controversy. What the top priority for them is harmony. But harmony not is an excuse to stand against any kind of the internal forces for dictatorship. That's what we need to fight for. So we talk with them. We say the advanced benchmark of integration should be the civic engagement. And the civic engagement, I think you rightly mentioned the representation. Representation in politics is not just for representation. It's not for ambitious people to get the role, to get social status. Reputation means dignity. But dignity means we have our own voices over there. We bring our history. We bring our traumatizing experience. We bring our faith. Representation means faith. Political party, conservative, they have their own faith for economic policy, for Africa, things like national security. Labour Party stand in the interest of working people and mass public. They have their own faith. But we forget the faith of it. Don't engage politics because that would be meaningless. That only would succumb to a bunch of the people with ambition, and the country would go into collapse.
Yeah, in this country, politics is not a privilege. It's a right, it's your right, so you take it, it's yours.
I think it's needed now more than ever.
And you look at the challenges we faced during COVID, we had a lot of racism towards East Asians and Southeast Asians, not just anybody who was actually Chinese, but anybody who looked Asian. We had a real trouble as a community tackling that because we didn't have many voices in Parliament at the highest level, even at the council level, or local level. It wasn't a priority for them because they aren't part of those communities that you're part of.
And Ben, do you want to add on to that? I mean, I think quite a bit has been sort of said about our sort of political parties and representation. How can our political parties do better to represent this voice?
Yeah, I want to make two points. Simon actually said exactly as I was saying around I mean, I much prefer the word integration than assimilation, because I think certainly I would like to see, and I'm sure you all do too, is the Hong Kong community on the one hand maintaining and defending and protecting its identity and culture as Hong Kong, but at the same time being part of the wider society. And I think there are two extremes to avoid. One is kind of ghettoization, where you only meet your Hong Kong community and you don't meet the wider community, and the opposite where you become what I think is the meaning of the word assimilated, which is you lose your identity and you just become like everyone else. And I think you want to avoid both those extremes and integrate, but maintain your identity. So in terms of political parties, I think we should be encouraging much greater representation of the East Asian and South Pacific community. I would love to see more people in Parliament and at other levels of government represented. But to answer I think the final question of the lady who asked a number of questions, I think there was a question about how important is it to join a party. And I would say it's certainly not the only way to engage in politics. I mean, first of all, there are quite a lot of people in this country who vote for a party but are not a member of it. There are quite a lot of people who are what's known as voting voters who might change their vote depending on performance of different parties. And then there are other ways of getting involved in politics. Marcus talks about think tanks, quite rightly. You can get involved in politics without joining a party. So I think I would encourage those of you that want to join a party to do so. But if you don't want to join a party, don't think that you can't participate in politics, because there are definitely other ways to do so.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Any other questions? Yes.
I came in late, so probably something has been discussed before. But I catch up on something what Simon said, which is very, very, very good. I mean, we don't get into politics just to grab power, to get the power influence. You have to have a passion and faith in it. I think I probably want to emphasize the word, a phrase called public service. Because I was born and bred in Hong Kong, so when we talk about politics, in the Chinese culture, politics means something very different from the British. I will probably use the word enter into public service. The Queen is a very good example. I mean, recently I think we all know what the Queen has commanded a lot of respect from people. All because, not she's a royalty, because of her public service. And I think Hong Kong can contribute to this country by entering into public service, work as a civil servant, work as a members of parliament. So we can all contribute in running this country by getting into public service. So don't get all this negative connotation, politics, dirty politics. No, don't use that word. You enter into public service to serve this country, to serve your own community. And that's the word I like to emphasize a bit more. Sorry.
Yes, and I'll certainly second that. What a wonderful word, public service. So just to round up, if I could ask our three speakers here, just 1 minute to perhaps sort of summarise some of their thoughts from the discussions today. So perhaps Ben, if you could kick us off.
Sure. Let me start where we just left off. I 100% agree with that term, public service, and that's really what politics should be about. I mean, it isn't always, and politics can be a pretty rough business, as I think the new Prime Minister is discovering after just a few weeks in office. But I don't like that phrase, public service, and that's what it should be about. And in that context, I think I would say that in addition to, we talked today about engaging your elected representatives in political parties, but there are other forms of public service. For example, you could look at becoming a school governor, which doesn't require any party political involvement. And we're running a workshop in a few weeks' time on how to become a school governor. So that's something you could think of. There are other ways of public service. at a local, community, or national level. So I think I would start my contribution today by using that very good phrase that we just heard. It's all about public service, a variety of ways to involve in public service.
And Marcus?
I would go back to a comment I made about politics, even before it gets to these elected officials and upper levels. It starts with you. It starts with you exercising your freedom of speech and freedom of debate and talking about what you care about with your friends, your neighbours, your family. And I think through that you'll eventually find whether it's neighbourhood associations who are doing community work that you're interested in, or it's a policy thing that you find a think tank which is aligned with your thinking, or it's something you find that you want to make a demonstration or write a letter to an elected official about. It starts with these small actions, and through that you kind of gain a broader knowledge about what are you really passionate about, what do you want to change, and that's how you push for that change, you exercise that change through politics. And I hope that today's discussion has made you all see how important it is and how invisible sometimes it is, and what difference it makes to our lives, right? We're all here because of local politics and local council and its arrangements and licensing and all sorts of, on the surface, boring stuff. But it happens. It happens. We're all here eating together and talking together and celebrating together because of it.
So one small step at a time. And Simon?
Thank you. So last word I want to say is I still remember how difficult, how struggling that we set up the exile diaspora groups in here. That was without reality. That people would look down at it because the people would say, well, what can you do? Until you can see we have our first office in the central London. So faith could bring change. Faith could bring your actions. Never ever underestimate your faith. You think you're in opposition, you're without power. You only have your faith for democracy. I would better to side with CCP because they have lots of resources. No, only believe in your idealism and in your faith that gradually will bring change. I still remember that time when we built diaspora groups. Most of those people that access help from us is those people in need. They're in poverty. They're destitute. Then when we advocate this with Home Secretary, Home Office to see how can we do better for Hong Kong people, when we talk about this, lots of netizens, lots of people comment online to say, how dare you to bring down your image of Hong Kong people. Hong Kong people should be rich, should be self-reliant. How dare you to contain the image of Hong Kong people? No. When we build up the diaspora group, when we build the community, we need to help each other. So only those people, they cannot be self-reliant, so they need society, they need to access the supports and help. So that's why we need to be together. And that is the process of learning, because no, we're not just the outsider coming to the UK, and we should be grateful to those politicians because you opened the gate for us. Really thankful. It's so ironic. When we talk about this helping Hong Kong people by Hong Kong people, we help Hong Kong people by Hong Kongers groups. We're being attacked by ourselves. But when MPs, they talk, I would like to help Hong Kong people. No Hong Kongers will attack because they are MPs. No. Self-empowerment, it means people. We need to set up our own groups, fight for our own rights, because it's a process of learning. We are British nationals. So if there are any injustice, unfairness we need to fight for, then we need to set up our self-help groups to fight for. That is the community. So when every time I've been questioned, I've been asked, who the big names you know in the Whitehall? I would say, if that is your first question ever about any kind of your values, people will move into the Whitehall. So that is important why Hong Kong people need to engage within the politics. It's not because you have ambitions for power. It's because the dignity of our people, to bring our history, our faith, our memory, and our sense of duty for those people now living in prison back in Hong Kong. We need to speak for them. That's why we are here, because they're now in prison. We're now in haven and freedom. And that's why that's the momentum. We need to keep going forward, fight against injustice.
Okay, well, thank you. We've unfortunately run out of time.